I'm somewhat of a New York native. Some of you may remember the startup PubSub, which was something I co-founded 10 years ago. And I've been out in California building out startups and trying to restructure Yahoo along the way, et cetera, which is why I'm bald. My colleague and I, Malcolm Pollock over here, Malcolm is one, you can recognize him here, his brain is trying to get out of his head on a nonstop basis. We've been trying to frame what's going on in the world today, and we want to present an idea to you that we think is a good way of summarizing what we're seeing happen in the world. Micah mentioned I'm based at Singularity University. We're based at NASA in Silicon Valley. And a lot of the talks that we heard over the last couple of days summarize some of what we think about the future of medicine, how do we empower small groups, the rise of peer-to-peer collaboration. We delve a lot more into detail in those things. And you've heard yesterday from Nico how fast technology is moving and how fast computing is moving. This is the original circuit board, and now we have teraflops of computing on the same space. I did a calculation. We've seen 40% a year increase in desktop computing speeds over the last 30, 40 years. If we'd had that same increase in the top speed of a car, 40% a year, we'd have a car today that went faster than the speed of light. And so that gives you some sense of the pace of what you have in your pockets. And suffice it to say that's my big shock and awe statistic. But you all get a sense of how fast the world is moving, right? And we have now 2.5 billion connected devices on the internet. We're going to 50 billion in 10 years and 1 trillion a decade or so after that. So think about this idea that we have 2.5 billion connected devices today to 1 trillion. We're like 0.5% into this information revolution. We're just tickling the edges of it. And this big shift from material to information-based is a really critical one. Some of you may be old enough to remember film photography. When you operate from a material basis, you have a linear incremental cost for every photograph you take, the cost of the processing, the cost of the film, et cetera, about $1 a photograph, right? When you go to digital photography, the marginal cost of an extra photograph goes to zero, essentially. And now you can take 1 billion more photographs. You go from scarcity to abundance. We heard that word yesterday. And when you have an information-based environment, you can do all these things with it. You can apply modeling, correlation, simulation, machine learning, filtering, social filtering, all sorts of cool things. And the environment democratizes even further. And we're seeing that shift from material to information-based, that rapid acceleration happen in all these other technologies that are now moving at the same pace as Moore's Law, and in some cases faster. We've gathered together the leading thinkers in the world to come and teach at SU. Craig Venter, who sequenced the human genome, Vint Cerf, Dean Kamen, and others. A lot of the speakers here have come and spoken at SU over the time. And we challenge our students to harness that pace of acceleration to solve the biggest problems in the world. Whether it's poverty, climate change, education, healthcare, it creates a gravity well where they're forced to think outside their scope. Garrett Lisi, the famous quantum physicist, actually came and said, well, you're not really a university. You're not really about the singularity. What are you? And I said, damn, nailed me. So here's one of our projects. These guys are looking at poverty. They noticed that most of the roads in Africa, 85%, get washed out during the wet season. And so they devised a kind of a next-gen Pony Express to use drones to carry medicine and food around, where you can't do that today. The price performance of these drones is doubling every 9 months. So we teach them to spot these doubling patterns and layer solutions on top of it. In biotech, we've seen DNA sequences now moving at 5 times the pace of Moore's Law. Okay, it cost $2.7 billion to sequence the first genome 12 years ago. It's down to $1,000 today. In 2 years, it'll be down to $100. By the end of the decade, it'll be free. You're all shedding DNA wherever you go, and it'll be free to sequence all of that. So privacy concerns at the top of our minds today. And now we learn how to read the genome. We're now starting how to write and create new artificial life forms with it. College teams are getting together to hack DNA in crazy, interesting ways. This team has gotten together and injected across the DNA of a cat, and now you can buy a glow-in-the-dark pet. You may have seen this on Kickstarter, the glow-in-the-dark plant. This is actually one of our alumni. And it sounds a bit crazy, but if you can do this with trees along the sides of roads, we don't need streetlights. So some interesting side applications, along with the Frankensteinian aspects of where this goes, right? Pretty crazy stuff. Now, we have an old word for this. It's called breeding. For thousands of generations, we've been crossing dogs and cats and horses together to get weird results. Dogs in Paris are an easy example. But now we've information-enabled it, and the environment accelerates. This is one of our other companies that's looking at, if the middle class grows in the way we think it will, we'll need 50 billion more farm animals for meat processing around the world within 2 decades. And so they're trying to grow meat in labs and grow leather in a petri dish, much better than hacking it out of this side of the cow. So this is the kind of crazy-ass thing that we're trying to do. All of these technologies are moving at this pace of change. The pace and change itself is accelerating as we're trying to navigate all of this. And it's hitting kind of very sexy headlines across the world. People are getting very excited about these technologies. But as we've kind of seen very clearly, we are not societally set up for this pace of change, right? All of the structures that we use to run the world today, our politics and civics is in sharp relief today, but our healthcare, education, legal systems, intellectual property, all out of date, all designed for a world a few hundred years ago, not for today, certainly not for where we're going tomorrow. We're pepper spraying our civics. This is the Fourth Amendment, right, disappearing with no public discourse around it. The Constitution is the software that runs the US. No way of updating it in today's legislative environment. I'm Canadian, so I don't have an expectation of privacy anyway, but not a great day to be an American today. Legal system, same thing as I mentioned, right? Religion's kind of out of date. Patent system, fundamentally broken. High-tech companies now spending more on litigation than on R&D. Very bad place to be. And this video kind of summarizes it. Most of you are familiar with the Google car. Why don't you just hear what this is what it was like to drive in it.
Holy shit. There's no fucking hands on that wheel.
Apologize for this.
Oh my God. What?
It's driving itself.
All right, you get the general idea. That scream, I want you to remember that scream. That's the visceral scream of humanity meeting advanced technology, all right? And the first time, thank you. The first time you get into that car and it takes off at that speed, that's the reaction. It's a freak-out reaction, right? Where are we seeing that? This is the Prime Minister of Turkey, a smart, thoughtful guy freaking out, right? And this is what's going on across the world. This is the most evil example of government gone amok that I've found, aside from yesterday. The Florida state government has shrunk the time of yellow lights, the traffic lights, to catch more people running through red lights. More people are dying so they can squeeze a bit more money out of the system. They're getting $100 million a year out of this. You know what I call that? Treason. This is the state acting against the citizenry. Where is the goddamn 35-year jail term for that? Right? Where is that? And this is the issue. Government has gone completely crazy all over the world pretty much today. And so I want to try and frame this to you. I want to take you back to high school physics for a second. You remember the ideal gas law. You compress a gas, the temperature goes up. You increase the volume, the pressure goes down, et cetera. When you have something like ice, the system, the molecules are close together. They're locked close together. They don't move very far or very fast. They hold their structure. When you get to more energy in the system, you get to water. Liquid expands to the boundaries that it's in. It'll more active, more heat in the system. They're a little farther apart. And when you get to steam, more energy is in the system. Now you've got highly activated molecules trying to escape out of any container you put it in, and everything's colliding with everything else. Very little virtual space between the molecules. And we're making the case that technology is heating up and vaporizing domain after domain after domain. Let's look at how we should send messages around. We used to use the Pony Express or homing pigeons or smoke signals, right? Slow, local, didn't move very far or very fast. We put a bit more energy into the system, and then we had the postal mail. We had ships carrying mail all around the world. Then we had air mail, and now we have tweets and Facebooks and emails. We've completely vaporized. All of our messaging lives in that vapor state. Once you release an email, there's no bringing it back, right? It's escaped out into the ether. With our value exchange, money, we used to trade camels and goats. Local, cold, pretty slow. Then we moved to a gold standard or letters of credit from merchant banks. Then we floated our currencies. Then we started emailing it around, getting a bit hotter. And now we're going to virtual currencies, and the ultimate is the attention economy. And we've completely vaporized value exchange, and that's now living in the vapor state. Computing, hardware, software, internet software, and now cloud computing, nicely named for our metaphor over here. And you can take entire industries and map it kind of along those lines. Mining, construction, still very capital-intensive, slow, cold, localized. When you get to the vapor state, music, books, newspapers, totally living in that vapor state. Malcolm is a Grammy Award-winning nominated recording engineer, is a software engineer because there's just no money in the music business, right? And things like cars and real estate getting more liquefied, and we saw the fantastic examples from Robin yesterday on peer-to-peer stuff. So we've taken domain after domain and seen where this goes. I want you to point to the last one there, societal structures. We used to have clans or tribes, very local, again, very slow, didn't move very far, very fast. More energy or heat in the system. We have nation states going to multinational corporations, free trade zones, and now we're in totally a vapor state. We collaborate with online groups and Facebook chats and Hangouts, right? And so technology, as our thesis goes, is reducing the space. We're all highly activated molecules bouncing into each other at conferences, airport lounges all over the world, online forums and so on. And domain after domain is getting vaporized. And here's the problem. Stable structures don't form in steam. You have the Occupy Wall Street movement, the Tea Party movement, the Arab Spring, lots of hot air, but nothing solid or substantive coming out of it. Right? My wife thinks I'm full of hot air, so I don't know where that goes. But you see the point. How do we have stable structures in a vapor state? And this is the gap. Now, Apple's done an interesting job. They have some hardware, some software, some cloud, and they use the design aesthetic to bind it all together, and they've created a lot of value in that world. So we can't keep heating up the world like this. Something has to give. Right? So in our equation, either the temperature drop, which is a reflection of money in the system, and we've seen that, a financial crisis, or you increase the volume between people to cool it off somewhat. And we're seeing that in Egypt, where they tried to cut off the internet, or in Iran or Syria, like they're trying to do that. In Syria, they're dropping the number of molecules, they're just killing the citizenry outright, right? The hell which is slowing down the communications. Or here, we're taking people out of the system by incarcerating them. It's just a different degree of extremeness. Or we can try and find another container, which Elon Musk seems to be single-handedly trying to do with Dragon and trying to go to Mars, but we're a ways away from that. We have to solve the problem here first. So what are the types of structures that work well in this vapor state? Well, we're seeing, and we saw some great examples over this last couple of days, but we're seeing participatory budgeting, localized self-determination at a very local level. The internet is really good at routing around problem areas and getting packets to where they need to be. Data centers are really good examples of failover, redundancy, power backups, and so on, where one unit fails, the entire system manages to route around that particular failure. You can replace that particular unit. Tom is one of the experts in the world in that particular domain. Sonal Shah from the White House noted that community-owned grocery stores had a much lower drop in revenues after the recession than normal retail chains. And in Colombia, they're crowdfunding a whole skyscraper, which I think is a perfect example of locally driven peer-to-peer, bottom-up type of structures, the kind of things we'll see. GitHub, I think, is a perfect example. We're so thrilled to see the type of thing that's happening there with peer-based values, reputation systems, all coming from that. So these are the types of traits as you go out thinking about what structures to build in the future. These are the types of characteristics and traits to look for in these new types of systems. One other thing about steam is that it will break apart and dissolve other structures. Right? It's we steam clean our carpets. Brian talked about medical devices. This is the Scanadu contestant for the Tricorder X Prize. This is the entire doctor's examination room in one little box. Right? And Vinod Khosla has made the commentary that 80% of what doctors do will be replaced by technology within a decade. We're going to vaporize the entire healthcare system and make it self-deterministic as we go forward. We have our curriculum. We update our curriculum every 2 months to try and keep pace with the pace of change. And we can't become, even if we wanted to, we can't become an official accredited state-sanctioned university, because to do that, you have to fix your curriculum and not change it. And how does any regulatory framework keep pace as technology is accelerating away from us? It's a structural issue that we've never seen before. I'll make a prediction here that within 5 years, it will be impossible to lie. And so what will politicians do then, right? Looking forward to this day. And I think we're going to see the end of nation states. These are big, hierarchical, brittle structures that are now trying to do so much, but the complexity of what they're trying to address is overwhelming them. They can't cope. I think we're going to end up operating more as city-states, which are much more resilient structures. The oldest cities in the world are much, much older than the oldest countries in the world, which have traditionally had a pretty short shelf life. One of our faculty who's a futurist has made a comment that he does not expect the US to exist as a country within 30 years. That's pretty dramatic, right? So these information layers are causing havoc now. Well, the pace of change is accelerating, and we're heading towards pretty dramatic societal disruption unless we figure out how to manage for it. If we can manage well for it, then we end up in a nice place of abundance. And so as you think about this, as you think about going out and innovating, look for these characteristics. Because the technology is not, if you think of all the disruption we've had in the last 20 years, say, mostly due to internet and mobile is kind of just kicking off. Just in the next 10 years, we have 3D printing, synthetic biology, big data, AI, advanced robotics, all coming online. We are not set up to absorb that pace of change. And finally, a couple of years ago, we had 1.2 billion people online. We're going to go to 5 billion, so that pressure is going to keep going up. And this is the as yet unreleased Akash tablet. It's a full Android 1 gig Opera processor with a phone in it, and its operating price is $35. It's about half of that to actually make that. It's dropping in price 50% a year. So within 2 or 3 years, this will be given out in cereal boxes. And 5 billion people by the end of the year will have this. And the information will route around them. So I think in the short term, we're going to see states as they are with impunity spying on the people. But I think in the medium term, and the dash cam example from Russia was a great one, where it's kind of the Wild West, and they all have dash cams to protect themselves from corrupt police and accident fraud and insurance fraud. And we're going to start to need to use those. Thrilled to see what the Sunlight Foundation is doing. We'll need a ton more of that kind of stuff going on. So, thank you very much. More about us over here. Thank you, Micah. Thank you for a great conference.
Thank you.